People who speak several languages. Have you ever had funny situations when someone didn't expect you to understand their language? I said something like, "You should really be careful talking badly about people in your native language. There's always someone who might understand you." I said it in German while I was in Italy. As soon as the words left my mouth, a woman walking by turned her head and replied in perfect German, like me, for example. I lived in South Korea for 3 years, but never learned much of the language. A friend of mine, though, was Korean, born there 100%, but she was tall, had studied in the US and New Zealand, and spoke with a flawless American accent. Her coworkers at the school where she taught assumed she couldn't speak Korean, so for an entire year, they gossiped about her right in front of her, calling her things like a foreign pig. Thinking she didn't understand a word, she just swallowed it every single day, saying nothing. Then came the end of year ceremony. The school offered her someone to translate, but she refused, and in front of 800 or so students and faculty members, she delivered her address in perfect Korean. She subtly called out the co-workers that had spent an entire year calling her a foreign pig. Apparently, one started crying from the shame of it. I wish I had got to see that. I would pay money to see that. My cousin's a big white guy who spent 2 years studying in Japan during college. Later, he ended up working for one of the top executives at Honda America. When his boss found out he spoke fluent Japanese, everything changed. Suddenly, my cousin was invited to every meeting and phone call with the Japanese branch. He'd sit quietly, just listening while the Japanese team discussed things among themselves, assuming no one on the American side understood. During breaks, he'd pull his boss aside and tell him exactly what they'd been saying, their concerns, priorities, even what they planned to bring up next. Then the meeting would resume, and the boss would address every issue before anyone mentioned it. The Japanese thought he was some kind of mind reader. The boss raked in huge bonuses every quarter, and every time he made sure to slide a generous cut to my cousin for being his secret advantage. My mom's a linguist who speaks around 15 languages fluently. Because of that, I picked up a few myself. I spent most of my childhood in Germany, so my German is solid, though my appearance tends to surprise people. I'm a 6'3", 220-pound black guy who speaks perfect German. Not unusual in Germany, but in North America, I might as well be a unicorn. One day, I was standing at a bus stop in downtown Toronto when I overheard 2 older German ladies, probably in their 60s, complaining. They were lost, frustrated, and trying to find the art gallery. Their English-speaking kids had ditched them for the day, and they were having a miserable time navigating the city. I wasn't in a rush, so I turned to them and said, in German, "You know, our city has a lot to offer if you know where to look. Want me to show you the way to the gallery and maybe a good spot for lunch?" They froze. Then they lit up. You'd think I just handed them a winning lottery ticket. They couldn't stop smiling or taking pictures with me, telling everyone they'd met the man who saved our day. I ended up walking them to the gallery, pointing out landmarks along the way, kind of like a spontaneous city tour. That's the day I somehow walked away with 2 brand new grandmas. I was out shopping with some friends, trying on clothes, when I overheard 2 store employees chatting right outside my fitting room in Spanish. They were complaining about how long I was taking and called me a dumb gringo. One of them even joked in English, asking if I needed any help. They clearly thought I had no idea what they were saying. When I finally stepped out, I looked right at them and replied, in perfect Spanish, "No, I don't need your help." Their faces went crimson. They just stood there, completely speechless. I've never seen someone regret a joke that fast. Besides being incredibly rude, that's just sloppy on their part. Most Americans at least know what gringo means. My dad made me cringe so hard once at a hibachi place. The chef was Hispanic, and my dad called him gringo, thinking it was some friendly term between Hispanics. I wanted to just disappear right then and there. When I started working at McDonald's at 16, nobody realized I spoke a decent amount of Spanish. A few coworkers would talk trash about me in Spanish, and I let it slide for weeks, pretending I had no idea. Then one day, a manager tried to flex, telling me she was worth more than me because she was bilingual. I looked her straight in the eye and answered, in Spanish, that I actually spoke it too. The look on her face was priceless. I'm Swiss and Peruvian, but since I live in Peru, I definitely don't look like the Swiss guy stereotype. One day, I was sitting on a bus when 2 Swiss girls behind me started talking about Latino guys. Then one of them asked the other if she found me attractive. I turned around and said, "I'd love to know that too." The silence that followed was golden. Their faces went from confident to completely stunned. Then we all started laughing. By the end of the ride, I'd somehow made 2 new friends. Edit, they were speaking Swiss German. Edit 2. They both later confessed that they found me attractive. I was in Germany once, and a middle school teacher invited me to be a guest in her English class. She introduced me, and I told the students I was from the US and happy to be there. Then she asked, "So, do you have any questions in English for an American? What do you think an American is like?" One kid in the front muttered in German, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Fat and stupid." The class burst out laughing, and the teacher went red like a traffic light. I just smiled and replied, in German, "Of course, many Americans can speak German." The kid froze. His face went blank, like a deer that just wandered onto a concert stage. Turns out he wasn't trying to be clever. He genuinely didn't think the American guest in their English class might actually understand German. My friend and I once shared a cab with two girls we didn't know. It was a long ride, so we figured splitting the cost made sense. The girls started chatting in Swedish, not realizing my friend is a Finnish Swede. Swedish is her first language. I can understand it too, but I was a little too drunk to care. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "They're planning to leave us with the bill." I told her we should warn the driver, so she calmly said in Swedish, "These girls will pay half before they leave." The driver understood instantly. He didn't even unlock the doors until they paid up. Another time, I was at the airport with my aunt. She'd broken her leg, but we decided not to cancel our beach trip. She was in a wheelchair, and since she'd lived in Germany, she spoke fluent German. I understood most of it too. As we were boarding, a middle-aged man turned to his wife and said in German, "I don't think disabled people should be allowed on planes." My aunt told me to stop pushing her, turned to him, and said in flawless German, "I'm sorry, sir, but I broke my leg and didn't want to cancel my holiday plans. You're being incredibly offensive toward disabled people, and I feel sorry for your wife. Have a nice flight." He went scarlet and stared straight ahead, completely silent. His wife looked like she wanted to disappear. My aunt's the kind of woman who turns other people's cruelty into their own humiliation, effortlessly. Not me, but my stepmother. She grew up in Japan and speaks fluent Japanese, but she looks Italian with light skin and dark hair, nothing that screams East Asian. Since she's only a quarter Japanese, nobody ever guesses she understands the language. One day, she and a few friends went to a salon to get their nails done, a little girl's day out. The women working there were chatting away in Japanese, gossiping about men and random things until they got to the pedicures. One of my stepmother's friends is a bit overweight and doesn't exactly have model-perfect feet. The salon workers started whispering and giggling in Japanese, making fun of her right in front of them. My stepmother let it go for a few minutes, then finally had enough. She looked up and said in fluent Japanese, "I didn't realize we had to look like princesses to get service here." Silence. Every single one of them froze. Then came the apologies, in shaky English this time, and the rest of the appointment was dead quiet. Her friend never even knew what was said, but she definitely noticed how quickly the laughter stopped. I had one of those moments in Japan too, but this one was more bittersweet than anything. I overheard a group of girls giggling and saying, "Oh, so sexy," and blue eyes. Naturally, I felt my ego inflate like a hot air balloon, so I turned around, ready to flash a charming smile at my admirers. They were middle schoolers, must have been like 13, and being Asian, they looked even younger. Wasn't as flattered after that. I'm Brazilian, and once I was flying from Atlanta to Rio. Two gorgeous girls boarded with their mother. They were chatting in perfect English, so I assumed they were American. One of them even had the seat right next to mine. We exchanged a few polite words in English, and everything seemed normal. Turns out they were Brazilian Americans, and since I'd learned English young, I can blend in pretty easily myself. As they were putting their bags in the overhead bin, the mother looked at her daughters and said in Portuguese, "Poor thing, he thinks I'll let one of you sit next to him." I turned to her and replied, also in Portuguese, "Don't worry, ma'am, I'm just being polite. I have a girlfriend, and it's a pleasure to share this flight with you." She froze, went quiet, and didn't say another word the entire flight. It was a flight to freaking Brazil. How dumb is she? Dumb enough to assume any man on a flight wants to pick up on her teenage daughters just because he had good manners, apparently. Thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, you can share if you've ever had a funny moment when someone didn't expect you to understand their language. And don't forget to check out our other awesome videos. See you